Poor old Morgan. Poor devil. Just came to a party, didn't know he was letting himself in for, and then eventually we sat him with those nutters. Hello and welcome back, and as the title card suggests, today we are looking at comparing Synology's DSM-7 released Synology Photos application, and we're comparing it against both of the photo applications available from QNAP, namely to say QuMagie and of course Photo Station. Both of these applications from QNAP have had several upgrades over the last few years, and I will say they've integrated these two apps quite well in a number of ways. Along with that, you've also got feature applications such as multimedia console, which we will touch on later in the video, but of course, a number of you may well be aware that Synology Photos is an application that is a merging of two applications from Synology in the past, namely that Synology Photo Station and Synology Moments. In DSM-7, they have been merged together into the Synology Photos application. I've already done comparisons and comparing those old apps with this new app, and basically what we thought of Synology Photos overall. But a number of you who are making the move away from cloud services may well be looking at Synology or QNAP for your vast decades and decades of digital photography. So let's touch on that a little bit. Why would you move to a NAS? And I'll keep it brief. A number of services such as Google's own Google Photos and some of the Apple Photos, iOS type stuff. A lot of these services, although they arrive with a free area of storage, in the case of Android it's 15 gigabytes, it has to be said that 15 gig does not last long. That 15 gig will cover your emails, it will cover your shared drive, in the case Google Drive, and of course your photos as well. But now things have changed in more recent updates to Google Photos, where photos are now being dealt with as a separate service. Running parallel, it also has affected the amount of space being taken up by backed up photos from Android devices, not so much Google devices. And it's been recommended that you take advantage of their cloud storage platform. So, for example, £16 a year for 100 gig, 200 gig a year for around about 25 quid a year, and of course 2 terabytes at £80 a year. However, a lot of NAS drives you get these days, even the more modest ones, you can pick up a decent NAS, including storage and including tax, for quite a good saving. And again, these are Intel-powered NASs. These aren't the budget ones. These are quite powerful devices. And these will last year on year on year, whereas with the Google services, you'll be paying 80 quid a year, and somewhere down the line, that data's got to live somewhere. You can't have it living on the cloud forever, and then eventually you're going to have to buy storage for it to live on anyway. Same goes if you want to go for something more powerful, and you don't worry too much about the storage. There are loads of different NAS drives out there that you can get for that money that will last a number of years, have a number of key services, and can be used for more than photography. So that is pretty much the motivation for a number of people who want to move onto NAS for their photos. And although this video is of course being watched by people that have already got a QNAP or Synology NAS system, I will highlight that this video is going to be presented towards people that aren't too familiar with NAS, because I think it's important that if you don't know about NAS, you need to know that the migration from those cloud-based services onto your own private server that can be accessed over the network or the internet, there's advantages and there's disadvantages. But let's talk straight away about these. First thing we're going to look at is graphical user interface. Now, Synology Photos borrows quite heavily from the design of Synology Moments that came before it. There's all the images there. This is your personal space. Also from here you can flick to an album view, and from this album view you can flick between different albums there, have a look at all the different stuff. And at the moment we're just browsing 5 albums on these 2 different NAS devices. Also from there you can flick straight into the albums tab. You can create a bunch of albums, and I'll go through that later on with the sharing and the filtering. And of course you have the ability to share photos quite readily that you share with other people. And again, sharing a photo is incredibly straightforward. And again, we will touch on sharing just a little bit later on. Also from here, you've got the filter system there on the right that will allow you to change how you cycle through the available photos. So if you want to create a contextual album, for example, something that actually shows a lot of the information that you want to see. So we go to the timeline view. we're able to break down that I only want to look at photos, for example, from 2019, 2020. I only want photos that have got the following people in them. I can say that I only want ones with me. And then this is cycled down all the way, and you can even go to geolocational data where you can say where in the world, if there is photo information, metadata handled inside, I can say that I only want the photos of me in London, and boom, I've cycled it down. I can go that through, and that filtration system's pretty cool. And then with these photos, that's me and my niece, I can go ahead if I choose, click that there, and I can either choose to share those images, again create a shareable link, or alternatively I can go ahead and create a customized album of those, and create an album like I've done there with those ones. Alternatively, I can download them directly to my machine, or I can edit some of the information inside them or move them to another area of the NAS. So again, the filter system, pretty cool in the way that it can be used to create information, create folders, I should say, how you can share things quite intelligently and filter quite a lot of cool information. Let's clear that filter out. All nice and quickly, and all via the local area network, as you can see there at the top. On QMagie, QMagie has its own filtration system as well. So once again, we've got a very similar user interface there of all of those images. Right now we're looking at the timeline view. We can flick down and change a lot of that layout. We can change the size of a lot of those icons. Again, that option is available there on the Synology. Ignore Gerald the seagull, we don't like Gerald. And again, you can filter a little bit on that, but the real filtration there comes down with using that icon. So once again, we can say I only want to look at photos. This time let's look at photos that have got Chris in them. So again, we've got those photos of Chris. Why don't we say we only want pictures of Chris and Charlotte, or Charlie and Chris. From there, we can go down, say when we want them. There's not a vast amount of information there. And again, we can file down into those different places, although clearly all of those photos were taken on the same night. And again, we can use that information to create intelligent albums. We can even change the filters on the fly. And again, as before, we can just go ahead and start selecting those images if we choose. We can select all. We can do the usual stuff that you would expect. So now I can say I want those images, and again, I can choose to share them if I choose. I can go ahead and create a new album if I choose. So again, create a new album. We'll just call this one C and C. You can create individual settings and permissions if you choose. And again, we've now created that album nice and quickly. Now we can go for another one there. It's a terrible picture of us. And again, other options as well. You can rotate, edit some of the tags, stream to localized devices. There's a lot more configuration options, and that's going to be a running theme throughout this video. But again, lots of little creation, lots of little bits and bobs that you can do. And the QNAP you're going to find has a lot of variables that you can play with, sometimes to its detriment, but mostly to the advantage of the end user. Now, I said I'd touch on PhotoStation. PhotoStation is the older application. I do get the feeling, looking at updates, that QNAP have updated PhotoStation a little bit less each time, and I do think PhotoStation, I reckon they're going to do a Synology and merge these apps into one for simplicity. But I will say that this is more business-led in its user interface. So again, you've got that option there. You can, filter through, change the size of the thumbnails there on the fly. All of this, remember, is being done remotely on the NAS. None of this is local to the PC that I am using. Create an album. Again, we've got the content filters we can run there. It doesn't use a lot of those settings, but one thing that I do quite like is you can upload a picture if you choose to the NAS, and it will search the existing tags that you've created for photo recognition to see if there's any of those people found. And again, that is an option that you can do on the Synology as well as lots of search options that we'll talk about later on. Again, that streaming option on QMagie as well. There's a lot more options if you have DLNA devices, TVs and more in your local area environment to cast stuff to directly from the NAS user interface. And just having a look at the image and the display that we see there on screen, we can filter through different views if we choose. So if we go to the gallery mode, we can see things a little bit the way they were before, and obviously that gallery can be configured in a number of ways. You can change a lot of the display settings, how you want images to be shown and more. Again, all that information is still readily available straight away from that user interface, but it can seem a little bit less intuitive, I would say, than Synology's. There's a lot of configuration options there, and because the QNAP system is trying to be customizable to so many users, it doesn't really pick a lane too easily, and the result will be that it's not quite as easy to use as Synology Photos, and definitely why the development of QMagie was improved in the way that it was. PhotoStation has more configuration options. It has a lot more share configuration options as well, and I will come back to PhotoStation later in the video. It's got that folder view. Of course, you can go down a lot more customizable in the photos, whereas Synology asks you to create prerequisite folders in locations that it chooses a lot of the time. It's not quite as hard coded as it once was. You can add some folders to the system, but not a lot, it has to be said. So a lot of that configuration, you can now be a little bit more selective about the folders, but it can still be a little bit better, and I kind of wish this selection menu was inside Synology Photos itself. Now, moving away ever so slightly onto PhotoStation again, we can talk about how information is shared between QMagie and PhotoStation, because a lot of people are concerned that Synology Photos being one application that merges all of those features together is just going to be easier. Who's going to micromanage two apps? Well, I'm pleased to say that QMagie and PhotoStation actually share a lot of their filtering data as well as some of that metadata. Consequently, if I tag people manually within a photo, so for example, I would go in, find people, scroll down, let's find a person. We'll go for this. This is my niece, so we're just going to put her on there, click OK. So now I've added her into my available list of people that have been recognized. What happens here, if we refresh that page, it should add Rhiannon now. Oh, mind you, it might have to index in the background, but the point I'm making is that PhotoStation has access to a lot of that indexing information that is used by QMagie. So you can end up, let's full screen that, and there's Rhiannon right there. So as you can see, that information is shared between those applications so that you don't have to worry so much that you're doubling up your jobs or having to run things parallel the way people felt when Synology Moments was PhotoStation and Moments independently of Synology Photos. So I'm going to come out ever so slightly of PhotoStation. I am going to touch on indexing now. Indexing is handled very differently by these two applications. You can't manage the indexing from within Synology Photos, it has to be said. You do have to go into the settings of your NAS, and the indexing within Control Panel allows you to action indexing. You can change some of the schedule of it and the quality of that indexing, as well as that affecting Audio Station, Synology Photos and Video Station for within the NAS. I will say QNAP does indexing better. I think it's inarguable that it does it better. You go into the the QNAP Multimedia Console app, and this is kind of your one portal whole system indexing tool. So content management, all the applications you have that support indexing from within the NAS that are installed, there's all of those ones there, and then we've got QMagie and PhotoStation there. You can say which folders you want the app to search through and index and which folders you don't. So you can just say search these folders, but also never look at these sources. So you can do an exclusion if you choose. And again, once you've done that, the indexing is automatic, and you can choose different albums for home, business or pleasure to be indexed in different ways. With the indexing, again, having those control settings all the way along, and everything from thumbnail generation being able to be created very easily within the multimedia console and very bespoke to each of those applications, something that the Synology device doesn't filter in to Synology Photos that much. If we go into the settings menu, we've got the profile information, we've got the personal information. Let's zoom in a little bit there. It's a lot of kind of GUI information, but that's really a lot there. Shared space that we'll talk about in a bit. You talk about if you're a professional photographer and you share albums, then this is going to be an area where a lot of those configuration options are going to matter. And then you've got the general settings menu there that affects everything. But overall, I would say that the configuration, indexing, and customization on the QNAP is just so much better, particularly in indexing, but still the user interface, the user friendliness of the Synology Photos platform so far is significantly better. Now, the next thing I want to look at is, of course, metadata. Metadata, for those that aren't aware, when you do have a photo, let's find a photo in here, let's find Christmas 2019. As you can see, in previous tests, some of these images have been duplicated as they've created smaller versions for other tests. That's my fault. That's not really the fault of the device, it has to be said. We go to the small icon view there. Find a photo, hopefully one that's got a little bit of metadata there. Let's find a photo, something festive, no doubt. I mean, obviously we're going to find a picture of a cat. We almost always find a picture of a cat, and this is not going to be any exception whatsoever. Here we go. I believe this one may have had filters applied to it. We can go to the properties, find out a little bit of information about it there, but that's really about your lot. However, if you make your way into the application Synology Photos and we find a picture, so if we go into the album settings there, we can go ahead and find, just go to the folder view. I believe we found a very good picture earlier on of a bunch of people sat at a table. We can have a look, find a picture. Let's take a picture of, that's right, when I got my Batmobile like an absolute cool person. And we can see there lots of information there in the background. You can see all of that lovely metadata all splashed out there, all that information being drawn out of Synology Photos. So let's go into QMagie. We're going to switch to folder view once again. So we can go into the folders, go to photos, and again you can browse these albums in this way if you choose. I'm just choosing to use the folder view so we can be nice and precise and make sure we're not duplicating anything there. And what we want to find is that self-same Batmobile photo. There we go. So there's our image there. We can go into the metadata there. We can find a bit more information about it there. But again, it has to be said that there's less information being readily shown to us here on the QNAP via QMagie. Now, if we go into Photo Station, I'm going to find that photo once again. Opening the photo up in Photo Station there, we can have a little look, and we can have a look at the metadata, but again, not as much information has been pulled away and displayed to us. Now, a lot of people quite like having all of that stripped metadata readily available, and one of the reasons for that is so you can use it in the filtering, so you can actually search a great deal more intelligently there. So for example, if I go into the search functionality there, all the filtration, I can pull up quite a lot of customization there. So again, we can activate all of those different filter conditions that have been centered around all that extra metadata, and we can really break it down into different filters there all the way through. So again, I've got to give Synology props on that one. I think they've done a really good job of being able to utilize all that filtered information very easily there. So if we make our way away from that metadata, because I do think, although the Synology does display the metadata within Synology Photos significantly better, both in QMagie and within Photo Station, I will say that I think the QNAP still provides that extra layer of customization all along. But this leads us very neatly into searching. Now, searching on these devices for all of your photos, you may have seen with me browsing through, when you're trying to find a photo, you're going to end up with decades of photos on your NAS. Searching isn't going to be that straightforward. If we have a little look and go back into the main tab there, make our way into the albums tab on both of these, we can see all of that AI-powered photo recognition there. So one of the things we can do is start searching for example, people. So there we go. We've got Robbie's personal space, Robbie December. So if we just search for Robbie, we can find the shared album that had my name. But on top of that, we can also create a search for an individual user. So for example, if we go for a search there, and then from there, type in my name, type in Katie, we can do a search. As you can see, it's finding pictures of me and Katie. I love that. I think that is exactly the way I want it to be when I search for tags. I don't want to have to use different features and functions to dig people out. And one of the things that disappoints me a little bit about QMagie is if I do the search for people is when you upload an image, so that wouldn't count. But if I do a search here and then repeat exactly the same search, I've got a lot more options here, which, although that's useful, and I quite, I'm sure there's going to be people looking for more precise stuff. I think if I go for this and I do exactly the same search, it doesn't feel as organic what I'm doing right now. So again, we'll do for the search for Robbie and Katie. We do a search, and because it's relying on that tag system, and it is worth highlighting, there are more photos on the Synology now. A lot of the time it's the same photo 3 or 4 times. So we're not going to compare these on the sheer number of photos that have been taken, because as you can see, that's just the same photo several times because I have different sized versions of this file from a previous video where I looked at metadata and compression of transcoding. But still, nonetheless, it took longer to search there on QMagie than it did on the Synology. If I go into the photos area and I just do a simple search there, it still opens up this big box there, something I'm not really that keen on doing. If I go into Photo Station and open up the search there, again, if I search for Robbie, Katie, and then click search, it's not bringing it to me, even though all of these photos are in that album. Even if I go to shared photos, I go to gallery mode, any of these, and I do exactly the same search, it is displaying these things, but it's not displaying them unless I do it the way it wants me to do it, by using tags, by using some of those customization options. And I think that takes longer, and I'm sure it's going to work, but it still doesn't feel as fluid and as easy and as organic as just using a search bar at the top of the screen. Let's remove a lot of those filters, go back into that. So in terms of searching, I do think the Synology does a better job of searching, particularly when it utilizes a much more user-friendly way of doing it. I mentioned earlier on about creating albums, and these conditional albums are pretty cool. So you can create a conditional album. Let's leave it with the name that it's got. We can have it living as a shared space, and then you can use some of the filters that you've created previously to create a conditional album. So right now I'm looking at a conditional album there, I'm using all of that information, and then boom, I've just created a conditional album based on that shared space. I can go ahead and create another one. So if we make our way back, this time using the personal space. So again, personal space, there's 5,000 photos right now. So again, we can fill those down a little bit. That knocks it down to photos. We can then say, right, I want it during this period, and then narrow it down by time. So again, we can go for it there. That's got it down. No, that's too short a time frame. It doesn't matter, but you get the point that you are able to do that, and you can even source which album and folder you want these to come from these conditional folders. Likewise, if you go into the photos and use the filter here, then of course you can go ahead and utilize pre-existing filters all the way along and then share those albums or create smart albums from within, something we saw me doing in a previous video as it was. Get rid of that quick filter there. Now, it's better displayed, I believe, on QMagie. Once again, we can go ahead and use all that information to create certain albums of certain people. So if we go ahead and say there will be those photos there, and then we can go ahead and create an album of those people if we choose. We can just click those there. We can multi-click if we choose, and then that information can then be presented as an album if we like. We can share that information. I know I've kind of touched on a lot of this already, but it's the idea that you've got those levels of customization available, but it still feels like it takes a fraction longer on the QNAP because it's got too many variables. And I get it. It's trying to give you all those variables so that different users can all feel included, that all users can do it their way. But still, nonetheless, I think sometimes it would be better to have a tab for easy or expert, something the Synology does to a degree with this tab here that flicks between personal space and shared space, with the shared space kind of being the professional side of things, where you can go along and, again, share those photos as you choose, go all the way through. All the options are readily and available there. Let's go back into that personal space. So last thing I want to talk about really is that AI photo recognition. And this is an area where I almost feel mean comparing Synology photos right now versus QMagie and PhotoStation, but Synology have fully released Synology Photos. They've released it in a form that they consider to be complete for launch. They will be adding features later on, but it has to be said that one of the coolest features, or actually one of two cool features that were in Synology's PhotoStation and Synology's Moments application respectively, is not present in Photos. One of the lesser ones is the map view, something QNAP never had, but the ability to look at a world map and then see all of your photos pinged on a map, and I hope they bring that back. But the other one is what's recognized by AI. So as you can see, both systems have facial recognition. Again, I can zoom out a little bit there on the QNAP, I think. Let's bring that back a little bit. And once you tag a person, every photo of that person will then be tagged. So if we find me on there, Robbie, we can see that 41 pictures of me have been tagged. Obviously, as mentioned, there's a lot of duplicates there. So on the Synology, it's going to display more items. And again, the viewpoint that you can go ahead with, you can change the view. You've also got the timeline view and all that kind of stuff. You can do like different sized images and more. Lots of easy stuff from those photos going back. And it's, you know, the tagging is still pretty good. Again, we can't really compare them because of the number of photos. But it's after you look at photos of people that things kind of go a little bit downhill for photos in its current version. Both of them have a Places tab, it has to be said. But again, the Places tab seems to be better on the Synology than it does on the QNAP, even though the QNAP is using exactly the same photos. Yes, it has to be said that Synology's photos, there's the duplicates, but look at the number of places that have been recognised there. South Coast, England, 645 photos. This has actually gone to the trouble of breaking it down. Chichester, Arundel, Lancing, all these different places that exist on the south coast of England have all been identified in that extra detailed way, something that's not present there on the QNAP to the same degree on the Places tab. And I'm sure there may well be a configuration option, but the AI there, I would have hoped it would go into a little bit more detail than what we saw there. But QNAP then closes the gap by the objects tracking. Now, Synology Moments had this feature. It was the ability for the AI recognition to not only recognize faces, but things. So I've not named these tags. This is the QNAP itself identifying different things. It's identifying that all of these are pictures of cats, even though the images themselves are not named the word cat. Everything from different kinds of food to different kinds of drink to different kinds of location, different kinds of stuff on screen. It has managed to identify a lot of that stuff with lots, let's say Christmas as a label. So again, I'd like the fact there's thing recognition, and if you're utilizing your photo collection on a semi-professional capacity, then the ability to search by things via a logical name, such as trees, grass, a vehicle, or whatever, it's nice to be able to recognize those in one click. And the fact that that feature's not enabled in the relaunch version of Synology Photos is a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, I think, personally. I think it's a shame that it's not there, and I think it lets Synology Photos down a little bit there at launch. So that's one area where I think QNAP have regained that lead once again. But it has to be said, when looking at both of these platforms, if you are someone that has an enormous photo collection, either on your NAS at the moment and you're thinking of jumping ship, or you have all your photos on a cloud storage provider and you're thinking of moving on to a local network attached storage server, then between these two devices, it has to be said that the Synology Photos application is still by far the most user-friendly of the two. It also displays GIFs in real time. It has a much more intuitive design, and although its existence is the result of PhotoStation for Synology not existing anymore, and Synology Moments largely taking the lead in what Synology considers for its photo platforms, I would say that overall it's the slickest design and it's the most responsive of the two. However, you cannot overlook the customization of QNAP's photo applications. The professional door here and the home and prosumer door here. The AI photo recognition having the ability to add things as well as people and locations. Although not always completely bulletproof, it never is for any platform, there's still a lot more of stuff covered here in a way that are just not available in the same way on that Synology platform. A few extra locations and events there that have been bulked together, which I'm quite impressed by. Also on top of that, the customization of the QNAP photo platform, and again, this does apply to both PhotoStation and QuMagie, thanks to that content management system multimedia console, means that you will have a NAS and a QNAP that can adapt its working pattern, its workflow, its indexing, its thumbnail generation to the way you need it to do. With the Synology, although being a little bit more customizable in DSM-7 than it was before, still being a little bit more rigid in what you can and cannot do within those systems, and support of things like ext3 and some multimedia codecs currently not being supported in Synology Photos. Those particular extensions that, although quite niche, are still used, do mean that Synology Photos is still not quite as good as I think it's going to become. But this has been photography on the QNAP and Synology NAS platforms, with PhotoStation and QuMagie versus Synology Photos on DSM-7. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Again, I try to talk about these subjects quite a lot because I think of all the industries that are making the move from cloud platforms and onto private NASs, or running cloud gateways and synchronized cloud and NAS systems, hybrid storage, I think for photo editors, photographers, anyone working in post-production, video editors too, they're some of the keenest movers onto private NAS, and these videos are largely for you guys, and I hope you enjoy them. Otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe if you want to learn more, and I'll see you next time.